Welcome to the Very Occasional Podcast with Morgan Quaid. I'm joined today by Park and Barb Cooper, writers of novels, comics, graphic novels, and words. Thank you very much for joining me, Park and Barb. How are you today?
Oh, we're fine.
She looks at me to make sure I'm fine. I'm still fine.
Is everyone fine?
Yeah, we're all fine.
Still fine.
Where did it all start with you? I'll let you choose who goes first in terms of writing.
I started out as a songwriter in Minnesota. Then I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, so that got pushed away. And then I met this handsome lug. We met through, you tell him, it's just so embarrassing.
You may have heard, I think, of the comic book Sandman.
Oh, I'm familiar. Yes.
In the letters pages, there was a guy in Boston who did a fanzine newsletter thing, and I wrote in and Barbara wrote in, and there got to be so many people it was a bit of a chore to Xerox it and mail it out to people. So right about that time that was falling apart, she and I started writing to each other and communicating a long distance relationship. Well, it got less long distance, and then we got married and stuff like that. I was already reading comics we both did when we were very young.
Yep.
And then I kind of didn't. And then at my first year of college, and then I'm like, I need a hobby or something. Maybe I'll get back into comics. And I got back into comics, and that's right around the time that Sandman and Vertigo were.
Yeah, I came back
going.
into comics from when I was a kid because of the Vertigo comics, particularly Hellblazer. I loved Hellblazer so much, I wanted to write Hellblazer. And that was not going to happen. I was American, and I was unknown.
Getting into DC Comics as such didn't happen, and so we started increasingly doing our own stuff with our own characters, our own properties, our own stories, and such as that. And then we got into adapting manga that was brought over to the United States, making sure the funny parts are still funny, the romantic parts are still romantic, so on and so forth. And then we just said, this getting art and illustration thing takes quite a while. What if we wrote prose novels? And we started doing prose novels.
Yep.
It actually started with the comics and then moved into prose later on. That's not a usual trajectory I've found for most people. What type of stories attracted you?
I like world mythology. I like supernatural tales. I like character-based tales. And John Constantine was the most complex comic book character I'd ever come across. I said, this is like an autopsy of a human being while he's still alive. Just really digging into him. I said, I can do that. Eventually, I wrote Gunstreet Girl. That was my first foray into comics.
Which is set in England. So.
Yeah. And that was a lot closer to who I was as a human being. When I actually look at it now.
Well, among other things, it's about a young woman going over to England. On top of everything else.
Yes.
All right. So the difference between prose and comic books. Interesting that you, again, went the other way around. So what was the biggest change you noticed other than words moving from one to the other?
There was so much more room. It really expand how much characters talk, what I could describe on the page. It was just, I realized I was doing the wrong thing. Trying to put my vision into panels wasn't big enough. So once I started doing that, I felt like I was at home.
At the time we moved from comics to manga, there was a lot of talk about compressed versus decompressed stories. And moving into prose, we were like, okay, you go from lyric writing to comics writing to manga writing to prose writing. It's just the field to get the room and time you have to develop a character gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
What's been the harder thing about writing prose versus?
There's never a problem of energy in the middle because you're like, I got it going, I got it now, I know how it goes.
No, I know.
But I guess having the energy to start and then eventually to finish it.
The hardest part is self-publishing and
listening. After you finish the book,
it's just such a pleasure to write it. It's actually doing this part.
The business of writing.
Well, when you first started writing prose, that you'd get stuck.
I would get excited about my setting, my character, and my concept and not plan ahead and not writing with her, just trying things out by myself.
I became the plotter.
Is it too much to suggest that what's the nicest verb I can use for she blank me to outline? I don't want to say made.
Encouraged?
Suggested?
Encourage me to outline.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one because I've always found there's kind of two main ways to go. You're either a planner or an explorer. I tend to be more of the explorer as well. So I will have a vague idea roughly where I'm going, but it won't be until I'm halfway through the book that I'll figure out how I'm going to get out of this problem, which sounds like that's probably more where you sit.
That's what we call play to find out. And some books are play to find out, and some are really well outlined.
And we've talked to other authors about this. For 12 years, we had an online column of comics and pop culture called the Park and Barb Show. And it came up with various other people of, I want to write this chapter and see how this character is going to react to this because I don't exactly know.
Now let's talk about the dirty, filthy, gross, horrible business side of the thing.
It's just a lot of work. It's rather more work and feels more like work and is less fun in general than writing the actual book is.
Well, it's because if you don't get an agent and you have to do it all yourself, you have to start from scratch and say, how do I get myself out there? You have to be an omnivert. You have to be really introverted when you write and not care that you're not talking to people and you're just writing. And then you have to come out and be, hi, folks, buy my book. Buy my book.
There's a shift.
Yeah.
I have locked myself up for 3 months to write this, and now I have to talk to the whole planet again.
Yes. Everything about writing to me is getting past I can't possibly. When I started out, I said, I can't possibly write anything but Hellblazer. I just wrote little Hellblazer fan fiction. Then I wrote Gun Street Girl and said, I can't possibly write anything but this comic. Then a manga job fell into my lap and I said, I can't possibly do anything but adapt manga. And then eventually I wrote a novel and I said, I can't write anything except with these characters. And then
you found one more character you could write. And then a couple more. And then 2 or 3 more.
So it's always getting past that one thing that you thought I can't possibly.
When you get to the point where there's something new, it might be a novel or something like that, that is a blocker or a barrier that you need to sort of push through. What is it that pushes you through that?
Here's the thing. When I have writer's block, I stop because either I don't have the information or my subconscious hasn't figured it out yet. It's like that old thing, we will sell no wine before it's time. The idea isn't ready yet. So I go and I am productive. I do the laundry. I do everything like that. If I finally don't have the idea, I say, Park, I'm stuck.
And then you think she asked me first, but no, she tries to do it by herself. And sometimes I can't help, or at least can't help right away. But half the time, maybe slightly more than half the time, I'll say, well, what if this happened? And she's like, oh. And then I don't see her for 4 or 5 hours. She's come back, oh, that was exactly what was supposed to happen. Oh, you really helped me. And like that.
You're such a genius.
We can bounce things off each other and do all the time.
Do you get that same thing where if you go for 3 or 4 months without writing, do you get really antsy and a little bit like, I need to do this?
Oh gosh, yes. I'm a horror to live around if I'm not writing something. I'm happy. I'm content. I kind of mope around and say, I don't have anything to write. And eventually...
Or think about.
Yeah, I just have to be like regular human beings.
Do you find this with reading as well? So I find it very difficult to read other people's work now. It'll spark an idea.
Can't go on a road trip or go to a swimming pool without coming up with a new book idea. And then she goes home and writes it. She doesn't go to the pool for another 3 or 4 months.
Let's move to the next section of the podcast called The Worst Pitch. So the idea here is simple. We all come up with a pitch for a film or a book or a comic book or TV show, anything like that. And the idea is it has to just be a truly terrible pitch that would never be greenlit. I'm happy to go first, but it's entirely up to you whether you would like to go first or you want me to.
You go first.
All right. We're going to go with the writer's block, but it's set in a sort of dark fantasy, turn of the century kind of world, medieval style, sort of atmosphere. And there is a large block of wood at the center of the town, which is the writer's block. And writers come from far and wide to go to this block, and they can only write at the block. It's the only space that's sort of dedicated where the inspiration comes and all that sort of stuff. But the trick is, they have to give part of themselves as part of the process. So they have to lose a finger or a hand or some sort of bodily organ or something like that in order to write. And the first hour of the film is just explaining all of this and getting people coming to the block and seeing someone, give a hand and get a manuscript in return that they write with their other hand. And then it just turns out to be a story about the butcher that uses the leftovers to make sausages and stuff. That's the second half. And then there's no climax, there's no conflict, there's no conclusion.
This can get greenlit at Netflix or okay, I see.
No satisfactory ending is
this is
A24.
A24. Okay.
Yeah. So that's my and we would just call it the writer's block because that's see what you say. That's what it is. So that's my idea for a truly terrible pitch.
Okay, I'll try mine.
Okay, I got nothing right now.
This is one that I've got around. That there's a millennial who became a vampire, becomes a vampire, decides to go up against the 1% and only kill really rich people, and it's called Eat the Rich.
Okay. So off the bat, I'm saying you could get this greenlit in a second. That's too good an idea. Eat the Rich. That's fantastic.
Do you have anything? Because that's
no. And he told me he was going to do this too. So I've been thinking a little bit.
You just pushed me into this.
I did.
Let's move on to the next round, which is the rapid fire question round.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. You've got one choice. You have to choose Star Wars, Star Trek. Go.
Wars for me.
Star Trek.
We have a divide, ladies and gentlemen.
We've had this conversation once before.
Yeah, it's like he's Marvel, I'm DC. It's
I don't hate Star Trek, but
no, I don't hate Star Wars. It's just that I grew up on Star Trek. You grew up on Star Wars.
I have problems with certain aspects of Star Wars, and yet the parts which draw me even more.
Yeah, this guy actually, during the pandemic, made me listen to the BBC adaptations of Star Wars things, and they were great.
They were
terrific.
In the far distant future, let's say 2025, all ink is removed from human bodies, and it is mandated that every single person must have one tattoo unique to them. What is that tattoo, and where do you get it on your person?
Probably some sort of, I don't know, magic symbol like a ring.
We can't see your hand, Barb.
I'm sorry. Right
there
here.
we go.
I'm going to make it as small as possible.
I'm the hand model demonstrating.
Okay. You.
Man.
But what tattoo are you getting, Barb? Sorry, I missed that.
What was the actual just tattoo? A magic symbol like a Reiki symbol or something that I can go, chokeray. Power.
Cool.
She wants magical powers.
I want magical powers, in other words.
Magic.
Yeah.
First thing I thought of was Star Wars Rebel Alliance. Where did I get that though? Shoulder. Oh, here. Yeah, on the sleeve. Yeah.
What was one of the hardest fictional deaths you've had to deal with? Either from film, books, TV.
Mr. Chip's wife from Goodbye, Mr. Chips. I loved that character. And sorry, spoiler alert, she didn't make it till the end of the book.
I've got nothing. I'm sure there is something, but I'm not one that jumps out at me. Isn't really.
You're not the sort of person that reads fictional deaths.
Oh, and they died. But yeah. Oh! Spoiler alert! Turn away if you don't want to hear. But I was really into Modesty Blaze for a while.
Oh God, yeah.
And I got into, and so I wanted more Modesty Blaze than just the little comic strips. So I started reading the prose short stories. And one day, the creator of Modesty Blaze decided he wanted to make sure that nobody used his characters after he was gone. So that was actually that was actually really traumatic to me. I'd suppressed it. I pushed it down. So it took me a minute to really think of it. But
you're allowed to pass on to the future generations one toy from your childhood. What is that toy?
Oh.
I will allow collections as one toy as well if they're,
The comic books I got from rummage sales when I was a kid. Somebody sold all their horror comics. I'm sorry I don't have them now, but they had House of Secrets, House of Mystery, things like that. That was the coolest. So yeah.
You said collections, and she's running with that.
I'm running with that.
That's the collection.
I have already done this. I had the Star Wars Millennium Falcon, where that all the little characters could get in and fly it around, and that went to my younger cousin. So that it has already been bequeathed to a slightly younger generation, apparently.
For the final question, this one has stakes to it. In the far distant future, a new servant class is developed to aid humanity in all our endeavors. You, as the decider of all things, get to decide which race that servant class is. They are either sentient robots, AI, that are now sentient, and that we have formed an agreement with them that they cook for us, clean for us, look after us, lots of stuff, or a race of demon folk that have been shackled using magic.
Oh, these are both recipes for disaster.
Yeah,
Let's go for the AIs.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is we'll have I have no mouth on my screen.
Yeah, at least they'll just kill me, and you know.
You have never read Harlan Ellison.
That was nice.
You've never read I Have No Mouth on My Screen. It's terrible.
Yeah, I don't want that.
I read it when I was 11. It still disturbs me to this day.
She'll protect me and say, you
don't want to read that.
All right. Well, the stakes are I have metaphorically rolled the die to see what fate holds for you both now that you have chosen AI as your selected group of servants. The future is bright and wonderful. AI never goes against humanity. They serve us. They serve themselves. Everything flourishes. Everything is wonderful. Eventually, there are AI/human hybrid baby children, and everything turns out great. All right. Well, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you both about your writing journey, about being self-publishing indie creatives and the like. People, I will put down in the comment section link to books and comics and such from Wickerman Studio. So be sure to check that out and support these two wonderful people. Park and Barb, thank you so much for joining me on the Very Occasional Podcast.
Thank you so much. We had a great time.
Thank you for getting up so early to talk to us.
Yeah.